This may just be the best camera on any phone. It's the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. I always like it when they show you the key specs on the front page here. We've got a 1-inch Leica main sensor, 200 megapixel telephoto. We've got the new Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, of course, a bigger battery than before. And I am particularly excited about this because while last year's 14 Ultra was a very good phone, the battery wasn't the best. I had some overheating issues, and as good as the camera was with its 1-inch sensor, I did find it struggled with moving subjects a little bit. So I'm curious to see if they've improved it here. And first thing you'll notice is that it looks like one of those guys who wears a really tight muscle fit t-shirt because that camera is bulging out. And that really is an impressive bulge. Look at the size of that thing. And we have a USB cable plus a little plastic case to keep your very expensive new flagship phone safe. No charger in the box though, which I think we're all pretty used to now. And does it have that rattle? Yes, it does. Yeah, it's the same rattle as the 14 Ultra. Is it just the periscope lens moving inside? I swear no other phone does that. Anyway, let's crack on with the review. Now, sadly, I have the boring color. This comes in black, white, and a new chrome silver. This very snazzy two-tone design with carbon glass and PU leather, whereas I have the black one with this glass back, which is kind of boring actually. And if I bring in last year's 14 Ultra and the year before's 13 Ultra, both of which use this kind of fake leather, I don't know, going back to the glass feels a little boring, maybe. So if you can, definitely get the chrome silver one, although I think it is 3 grams heavier. As you can see though, not a whole lot has changed over the last 3 years in terms of design. These phones are dominated by this huge circular camera module housing the quad Leica camera system. And actually it was the 13 Ultra here which introduced the 1-inch sensor, and that hasn't changed significantly year on year. These two also had variable apertures for the main sensor, but we don't have that now. Weirdly, they've dropped it on the 15 Ultra, and I've been told the reason they've got rid of it is that the 15 Ultra can achieve comparable exposure effects through software optimizations and algorithm upgrades without the need for a hardware-based variable aperture, or at least that's what Xiaomi told me. From a camera hardware perspective, the main change this year is that periscope telephoto lens. It's gone from 50 megapixels to 200 megapixels, and they've also gone from a Sony sensor to a Samsung with the HP9. From my testing, this actually is a decent upgrade in terms of the camera. But design-wise, it does feel perhaps a little uninspired now. It's actually a tiny bit thicker, about 0.15 millimeters thicker, and it weighs 10 grams more than last year. You've got this very subtle curve on the edge. It basically is a flat screen just with the tiniest of tapering at the edge. It's a decent looking phone. That might be a little bit offensive to some people, but if you're buying this, it's probably because you want that camera system. Although I do kind of miss, as I say, that PU leather that we had in the last 2 generations. It made it a bit grippier to hold. It wouldn't slide out of your pocket as easily. So yeah, it's fine, but I don't think it's necessarily a step forward. We still get IP68 dust and water resistance, although unlike some of its flagship Android rivals, there's no IP69. So I wouldn't recommend taking it into the shower with you and blasting it with hot jets of water, which IP69 would protect against. It's not a big deal, but when other phones have it, then, you know, for a flagship that costs £1,300, more or less, it would be nice to have. Pricing of the 15 Ultra will be the same as last year's 14 Ultra. We're talking $12.99 here in the UK, which makes it 50 quid more than an S25 Ultra, but there is only one SKU of this, 16 gigs of RAM and 512 storage, which is a higher end spec than what you get with the S25. And so actually, if you match them like for like, not only will this still have 16 gigs versus 12 on the Samsung, but the Samsung will be 50 quid more. So you could argue it's slightly better value than the Samsung offering, but certainly it is still a very expensive phone. And you may also want to spend a little bit more on their photography kit, where you can attach this hand grip and dedicated shutter button. It has its own 2000 mAh battery and also a 67mm filter adapter ring, so you can screw on NDs and filters. So the photography kit obviously costs more, adds a good deal of bulk to your phone, but I don't know, having a dedicated shutter button, which we don't on here, which seems like a bit of an omission given how camera-oriented the phone is, but also the bigger battery, you know, a proper grip. I think if you are buying this primarily for the camera, which you probably are, the photography kit's worth getting. Going back to this screen though, and it really is a bit tasty, I do obviously miss the anti-reflective coating you have on S25 Ultra, and perhaps the Honor Magic 7 Pro is a pretty close rival in terms of the display, but I'm going to say this is top 3. Not only do you get HDR10+ and Dolby Vision, the peak HDR brightness is also a touch higher than last year, now at 3200 nits. They've also bumped the touch sampling rate from 240 Hz previously to 300 Hz, so everything feels even more instantaneous as you press it, and we have a 1920 Hz PWM, or pulse width modulation, so particularly at low brightnesses, it's more comfortable for your eyes. And I also appreciate the color accuracy of the screen, and you've got lots of different options to choose from. Oh, look at that. I've just realized my phone screen matches quite nicely with the TV background there. Anyway, let's talk about what's happened on the inside, because I think this is actually a more significant upgrade. Not only do we have the new Snapdragon 8 Elite, but we also have slightly faster storage. It's UFS 4.1 versus 4. More importantly though, we have a bigger battery, 5410 milliamp hours, which is up from 5000 on the global version of the 13, that's not the 13, the 14 Ultra, although I think the Chinese version was 5300, so it's less of an upgrade. But at least for me here in the UK, and if you bought one globally, this should be on paper quite a big upgrade in terms of battery life, and it turns out it actually is, and I'll come to those tests in a second. So, new chip, bigger battery, slightly faster storage, and like last year, all models get 16 gigs of RAM and 512 storage. And to give you a bit of an idea, here is the 13, 14, and 15 Ultras, and if I fire up Geekbench 6, the 15 Ultra is 38% faster in single core and 28% faster in multi-core. And then in the Geekbench graphics test, which I'm only using because you can't actually install 3D Mark in here. Normally I'd put Wildlife Extreme and do a stress test, but you can't actually install it on Xiaomi phones, or at least I can't. But we're also looking at a 30% uptick in graphics. And not only is it faster, but it also runs cooler. With the help of my trusty thermal imaging camera here, you can see the peak temperatures after 15 minutes of gaming on the 3 phones. But we also have what they call their next-gen 3D dual-channel ice loop system, which is a bit of a mouthful, but actually is 13% larger compared to the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, which helps to improve heat dissipation. And I'm very happy to see the 15 Ultra does run cooler. So it's faster, it's cooler, and it lasts longer. Obviously, with the bump from 5000 to 5410, you'd expect it to last a good deal longer. And also, they're using a silicon carbon battery for the first time, so actually the battery is the same size, but it's more dense, and together with the more efficient chip, judging by my little video streaming test here, this is just YouTube playing at 150 nits brightness on Wi-Fi. 13 Ultra dies at 13 hours 47, the 14 Ultra lasts over an hour longer at 14 hours 55, the 15 Ultra still has 29% left. And in fact, this just kept going until 21 hours and 15 minutes. This is very good news, because in my last couple of flagship battery tests where I've included the 14 Ultra, this has basically given the Pixel phone competition for last place. As much as I did like this phone, I have had issues with overheating and the battery just not being very good. It consistently came back at the pack. So next time I do my battery test and include the 15 Ultra, I think this could be up there with the best of them. It is a big upgrade in battery life. And we're still getting their 90-watt hypercharging and also 80-watt wireless hypercharging. Although, like most phones now, it's BYOC, or bring your own charger. One thing we still don't have, though, is a UWB chip, or ultra-wideband. Not the end of the world, but most other flagship phones do offer that, and it can be handy for walking up to your car and locking it, or using, smart home devices. It basically gives you more accurate, faster, precise tracking of the phone. We do, however, have Bluetooth 6, which I believe is the first time you've seen that in a phone. But to some extent, Bluetooth 6 may negate the need for UWB a little bit, although only once more Bluetooth 6 devices come out. So it's a bit annoying for now, but perhaps this is more future-proof. And that is the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments below, and can you imagine if I did finish the video without even talking about the camera? It's the whole bloody point you'd buy one of these. No, this is serious business, to the point where I'm going to pop my glasses on here and look at some photos. In fact, I've taken about 800 photos on the 15 Ultra over the last couple of weeks. Is this much better than last year? Well, we still have a off camera module on the back housing this quad camera system. So whereas last year we had a 3.2 and then a 5 times optical zoom lens with the 2 telephotos, now we have a 3 and a 4.3 down there. Although of course they still say you can have lossless zooms, double that, but really it's just taking a crop in, so marketing. So the headlines are 4 cameras. The main camera has a 1-inch sensor, but then it also did last year and the year before that. And actually that hasn't changed significantly except for the fact that it no longer has a variable aperture. Now it's just a fixed f1.63. The ultra-wide has also been rejigged with a different sensor. We've gone from the Sony IMX858 to the Samsung JN5, which I believe is better suited to ultra-wide lenses. But in doing so, they've actually downgraded the aperture of the ultra-wide from f1.8 last year to f2.2 now. The first of the 2 telephoto lenses is near enough identical to last year, but what really is interesting is the bump from 50 megapixels to 200 megapixels for this longer range periscope telephoto, which gives us that 4.2 times optical zoom. And this also has a new and much bigger sensor. It's now 1/1.4 inch versus 1/2.51 inch last year. That's a big improvement, which means it can now take in 36% more light than on the 14 Ultra. And finally up front, we have near enough the same selfie camera, 32 megapixels, the OV32 sensor. I'm sorry, is that not the cutest little house? The most sort of picturesque postcard house you've ever seen. It's actually next to this church. It's called St. Cuthbert's, and if you're a fan of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, then you may recognize, you can see my little iPhone filming rig here, the top there is wherein Hot Fuzz, they push it off and it kills the journalist guy. It's a horrible, gruesome scene. But yeah, this is my little hometown of Wells. I'm shooting this on the front selfie camera with the 15 Ultra at 4K 60. Got some very bright sunshine there, which you don't see very often in February as I'm recording this. It's a beautiful day. Look how pretty this is. Let me show you a whole bunch of photos taken on the new 15 Ultra in a variety of different color modes, because for photos you can choose between Leica Authentic, which gives you a more classic, more natural tone, versus Leica Vibrant, which, as Xiaomi says, will freshen up your photo. It's a bit more punchy, it's a bit more vibrant. And then specifically with portraits, you have Leica Portrait mode, and this is where the color science has been done by Leica and gives you a more classic, natural look with a focus on realistic colors. But then you've also got Master Portrait, which is Xiaomi's own portrait mode, offering a slightly brighter, more vibrant. I love the fact that we have different options. Personally, I quite like Leica Vibrant for photos and Leica Portrait, well, for portraits. Now, rather than me spending the next 45 minutes boring you all to death as I show you my photos and comment on each one, let me give you my takeaway. This is an incredible camera. That 1-inch sensor with that very wide f1.63 aperture gives you the most beautiful natural depth of field, and I just love using it. This is one of those cameras that just makes you excited about using it for street photography, for portraits, and after a couple of weeks of using this and taking hundreds and hundreds of photos in all the different modes, there are some absolutely stunning shots that make you question whether that was taken on a smartphone. However, this still struggles with moving subjects, particularly for portraits, but even in just regular photo mode. For every one photo where I've thought, holy crap, that looks incredible, there's probably been 2 or 3 where I've then looked and gone, oh, I didn't quite get that. There was a bit of ghosting or blurring, or that person's hand was, or the face was moving. And I'll come to a little comparison with the 13 Ultra in a second, but it was a similar issue then. Has it got better? Maybe slightly. This may just be my experience. It's definitely worth looking at other reviews and seeing what other people say as well. But as much as I do love this camera, whether it's the processing time or the shutter speed or whatever it is, it's just not consistent enough. What can help a little bit though, is if you tap on this little running dude, which turns on motion capture, and I think this trades a little bit of the image quality and processing in favor of better motion clarity. Having said all that, let's have a little look at how it compares to last year's 14 Ultra. Side by side, you can see the 14 often oversaturates the image. When you've got strong colors, it just whacks up the vibrancy, and I much prefer the more neutral, more realistic shots of the 15 Ultra. So in terms of the white balance and the colors and the tones, clear improvement with the 15 Ultra. And as you would hope, that periscope telephoto lens gives us much sharper, much more detailed long-range zoom shots. And especially when you go up to, say, 30 times or 60 times, the clarity is so much higher. And for example, with this lady on the Lime bike, the 15 Ultra is much sharper and more detailed. And just generally, it's quite surprising how much of a difference the overall reduced contrast and less over-sharpened look can make with the 15 Ultra. It doesn't come across like a phone camera anymore. I also quite like that the ultra-wide has a less ultra-wide field of view. It's now 14mm rather than 12mm last year, but ultra-wide photos are also better. Perhaps it's due to the new sensor or the improved processing, and in low light especially, the orange lightings become red and taken over the whole room on the 14 Ultra. I'm also happy to report that while the selfie camera hardware hasn't changed, whatever magic is going on behind the scenes has actually improved the image quality as well. There's more texture, the colors are more realistic, especially skin tones, and this portrait shot looks kind of horrible on the 14. Whenever I'm here in London making one of these videos testing a camera, what people are most impressed by is the fact that I haven't had my phone nicked yet out of my hand as I'm walking around with it. So far, so good. As with most phones, I think photography is still the main priority, but the 15 Ultra still gives us a very good video camera. I'm here in London on a pretty gloomy day, and I think the image quality is very nice. It definitely has that quite strong Leica aesthetic to the colors. Everything's a little bit more contrasty, the shadows are heavier, and unless you shoot in log, you can't really get away from that. But I do want to give Xiaomi credit for not only giving us really smooth transitions between the lenses, even shooting at 4K 60, you can go right from the ultra-wide up to the periscope telephoto, but hats off to Xiaomi for giving us really consistent colors and white balance and quality as you switch between the lenses. In my opinion, Oppo has been the best for this for a while, but now I think Xiaomi's right up there with them. And just wandering around Trafalgar Square, there's so many performers. There's this chap on his typewriter doing poems, and actually if you saw my Find N5 review, the foldable phone recently, he actually wrote me a whole poem for foldable phones. There is an appreciable drop in quality when you go back to the ultra-wide lens, and then when you do zoom into the telephotos, while the quality is still very good, the stabilization isn't quite as good. You can feel the vibrations of my walking. You can also shoot in 4K 120, and while the stabilization isn't as good at this level, really this is about slowing it down for some 4K slow-mo, and so playing back at 25% speed, with good lighting, it actually comes out quite nicely. Now going over to the Pro mode in the camera app, which if I'm honest I don't tend to use that much myself, but I do like that you can save your own presets and, even better for me, import them as well. Now I just need some pro photographers to share their presets online. Also, in the camera settings menu, there's lots to play around with, but I would recommend turning on smart noise reduction and also make sure auto frame rate is off, and also change picture quality to super. It's only on high by default. I also think turning on rule of thirds guidelines as well as the center and straighten lines makes it easier to frame your shots. You can even customize the style of the shutter button and the sound it makes. And finally, the software. This ships running Android 15 with HyperOS 2 on top. That's Xiaomi's own UI, and if you've used one of their phones in the last few years, this will feel pretty familiar with its vertical recently used apps menu and absolute ton of pre-installed apps, aka bloatware. It's not my favorite, it's not bad, it's fine, and they do promise 4 years of Android updates. And actually, I think the Xiaomi offers the most comprehensive AI toolkit outside of the S25 Ultra, with an absolute ton of photo editing tools, from AI image expansion and AI eraser and reflection removal and enhancing clarity, and the usual array of transcription and summarization tools in the notes. There's nothing really to write home about in terms of the software experience or the AI features, but it does everything pretty well. And most importantly, it all feels fast and responsive. So overall, the 15 Ultra is a big step up. We have the new chip, which obviously is faster, it runs cooler, we have a much longer battery life, we also have an improved camera, with the caveat that photos can still be blurry from time to time. I wish it was just a little bit more consistent. If you've got any questions about this, drop a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, a thumbs up and a subscribe would be fantastic on all those annoying YouTuber things, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.